Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Find Your Edge. My name is Jordan Agoli, and thank you so much for watching or listening wherever you are in the world today. I greatly, greatly appreciate you. Guys, we did it. We did it. When I set out to start this show 2 or 3 years ago, the man that we have on today was one of the very first people that I had listed as the guest that I wanted on the show. He doesn't even know that. He's smiling right now as I say this. Guys, we have on Dr. Jonathan Woolfson, who is the founder of Woolfson Eye Institute. I think he is the greatest LASIK surgeon in the world. He has performed over 100,000 LASIK surgeries. Over 300 eye doctors have come to him for their LASIK surgery. Woolfson Eye Institute, I believe, has over 13 locations in the Southeast now. They have over 200 employees. Anything related to your eyes, they will take care of and handle. I've worked with them for many years. Dr. Woolfson has been a great friend, a great mentor. He's one of the kindest and most hardworking and intelligent men that I've ever met. Dr. Woolfson, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jordan. Good to see you. It's quite an intro.
It is great to see you as well. And off camera, everyone, he got mad at me for calling him Dr. Woolfson. So today it's Jonathan. I'm going to try. I'm going to try to be Jonathan today. But Jonathan, welcome. And just how are you? How's life going right now?
Everything's good. I'm loving life. I've got 4 teenage kids, so that's an interesting part of my life right now. And I love what I do at work, so everything's good.
Yeah. One of the things, whenever I brag about you to people a lot, and I always tell people about you, describe to the listeners, what is a day and week in the life of Jonathan Woolfson like in terms of work and what you do? Because, man, you've got an intense schedule some of the time.
Well, it's interesting because I am, by nature, very kind of hyper-focused on things. And I thought going into being an eye surgeon would limit the amount of work hours that I would do. And somehow I still managed to have a work schedule that is pretty intense. But we've got clinics around the Southeast, and so I still do surgery a lot in Atlanta, but then also in 3 different cities in Tennessee and in North Carolina as well. So every couple of weeks I get in the car and I go from Atlanta to Chattanooga, Knoxville, Johnson City, Asheville, and come back. And so some weeks I'm doing surgery in 5 different cities in 1 week.
On that note, can you describe to people the loop you go on and the Wolfpack team that you have behind you? Because this is a really incredible infrastructure you've built to manage helping all these patients.
Well, it's an interesting kind of model in terms of practicing medicine. And I've limited the scope of what I do to a very narrow area of just doing LASIK surgery. And that's all I've done the last 25 years or so. But it sounds like a long time, Jordan. It's like I was thinking, I can't be that old, but I guess I am, right? So for the 2.5 decades, all I've done is LASIK surgery. And so I've got doctors that are like really experienced, really skilled, that see patients before surgery and after surgery. And if patients ever want to see me before or after surgery, they can. Most patients, they just want to get the surgery and then they're done. And so I've kind of hyper-focused on one small area of doing LASIK surgery, and I do 1 or 2 other things around cross-linking. But I go into the different cities, we do surgery, patients have already been worked up, and I review everything, review it with the patient, we do surgery, and then I move on to the next city. And so for me, that's worked out really well. And the surgery we do is very, very specialized. And so I think it works well for the patients as well, because this is all I think about all day, every day, every day I'm thinking about this. And so we're able to have a really, really good track record in terms of outcomes, in terms of how patients see and staying away from complications. And when they do come up, we're, for the most part, be able to handle them really, really well.
Do you still travel with the laser?
I don't physically go with the laser. The laser always would go ahead of me now. We've got lasers in most of our centers.
Okay.
And we've got engineers that calibrate them, before surgery. So,
can you explain to the listeners on how you guys are able to use previous data from all other patient surgery to kind of match that to what that specific person needs present day?
Yeah, so we're very big on outcome analysis. So what that means is that, hey, we've done a bunch of surgery, so we look back and we say, okay, on those patients using a specific laser and in a specific location, how did those patients do? And how can we tweak our nomogram, our techniques in terms of doing surgery in the future based on the experience of the past? So we can look back and say, okay, you're a 40-odd-year-old male and your prescriptions are -6 with one diopter of astigmatism, let's look back on 1,000 patients that fit that profile, and how did they do, and can we make that better moving forward? And so those are small incremental changes, but they do make a difference. And as I'm sure you're aware, everyone wants to have vision as perfect as possible. So we try to tweak that up as best possible.
Yeah. And you accomplished that. It'll be, 6 years in March that I got my LASIK surgery.
It seems like yesterday.
It really does. It doesn't seem that long ago. I'm still 2015 today.
2015. That's
2015.
So cool. That's better than me. I'm so jealous.
It's incredible. So my wife that is hopefully listening to this, I'm getting her LASIK this year. She's been fighting it, but she complained. We were laying in bed the other night. And she's like, these glasses and contacts. I said, well, I know the guy. I know the man for this. Well, I'm really excited to have you on. We were talking before off camera about how we've worked together for so many years. And we always have these kind of fleeting conversations. You'll tell me a little bit about your background. I'll tell you about mine, but we never get to dive into the backstory. So take us all the way back in time to where you were born and set the tone for what life was like then.
So I was born in 1964. Seems like it's a long time ago, in a country that's now Zimbabwe. At that time, it was called Rhodesia, which is a small little country in the southern part of Africa, sitting right on top of South Africa. It's in terms of east-west, it's right in the middle, so there's no coastline. Very small country. At that time, it was under British rule. It was a colonial country. I was actually born a subject of the Queen, and I grew up there in a very kind of segregated society. It was very bigoted in many ways in terms of race and gender and everything. And I had very little exposure to minorities, very little exposure to other different kinds of people. I was a tennis player, so I had, ironically, a lot more exposure than most of my colleagues and my friends, just because I played tennis against all kinds of people. And my dad, for his time and place, was very open-minded and really believed in understanding the people around us. And so I learned African languages, not really well, but pretty well as a kid. So it was a very different kind of environment to grow up in.
Yeah.
As we got older, there was a war going on, so it was a war environment. And we moved to South Africa when I was 17. I spent 3 years finishing up high school there, and then used the tennis as my ticket to come to the US when I was 17 to go to college. And the rest of my family stayed there in South Africa. And I came ready to play tennis. I had no intention of doing anything academic whatsoever. I wanted to be a tennis player. That's what I wanted to do. And but I always had an affinity for mathematics, and I loved math. My father was a math guru who would play all kinds of math games as kids. And I was in college at Vanderbilt for a short time, for one semester, and made a left turn, decided to do something academic, and transferred to a small school in the mountains of Tennessee. If you've ever gone from Chattanooga to Knoxville, you go up a big mountain. Yeah. I think it's at the top of that mountain. And it was a beautiful school, and they took me from being a tennis bum to doing something academic. And I ended up being a math major. I wanted to be part of the community, so I took the EMT course to be on the ambulance crew, and really loved it. And spent a lot of time working in the ambulance crew, ended up running the crew for a while, and decided pretty late to go into medicine. And luckily I've been taking all the right courses and took some summer schools and was able to graduate on time or early. I still graduated as a math major, but I took enough courses to apply to med school, and I went back to Vanderbilt for medical school.
Wow.
So it was a very circuitous route.
Before we get any farther, you just covered like 30 years of stuff. There's so much to unpack there. Let's go all the way back to kind of childhood. I think that's a very unique upbringing and background. So you said born in Zimbabwe. What was the country name before?
It was called Rhodesia. It was actually named after Cecil John Rhodes, which is the same Rhodes as you probably heard of the Rhodes Scholars.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like Bill Clinton was a Rhodes, I believe he was a Rhodes Scholar. And it's a very coveted, very exclusive club of people that are super bright, super accomplished academically. And it's tied into Oxford University now. And so folks who are Rhodes Scholars get to go and study at Oxford for a year after college, usually.
Yeah.
I don't remember all the details around it. But it was funded by Cecil John Rhodes, and he was a mining magnate who helped develop a lot of the mining in southern Africa. So there was a lot of gold and diamonds, and it was mostly those two there. And the mechanism he did it would not pass muster for being ethical these days. But back in the early 1900s, he was able to amass a lot of a mining fortune, essentially.
Yeah. So growing up with the segregation, you said that your father was very open-minded. At that time, did you understand the segregation, or it was just kind of that's how life was because that's what you were born into?
No, I mean, to me, it's a great example of the power of propaganda. Because where I grew up, things were so segregated, you didn't really, and there was no counterbalance. There was no opposition party or opposition media saying, hey, you're not thinking about this, or you guys are full of shit. You shouldn't be, doing this, or you shouldn't be thinking a certain way, because the government would shut it down. And it was the same way in South Africa at that time. When we moved to South Africa, there was a very strong apartheid system. And if you were very vocal against the government, you'd be thrown in jail, you'd disappear, or just bad things would happen. And so with that lack of counterbalance, you didn't really question things very much. And I did more so because we had family that had left the country and gone to England, and an uncle who was very formative in my thinking. But in general, it was very difficult to imagine a different world because there was no exposure to that.
Yeah.
And I think even people today think that they're immune to propaganda because they're smart enough. And I just think that's just so wrong. I mean, the 1930s in Germany really proved that, right? I mean, Germany was the most educated country in the world, and look what they went through in the 30s that led to Nazi Germany. But even more recently, I just see the way social media has taken over, and people listening to their own little echo chambers has led to something very similar to what I grew up in, even though for me it was the whole society was subject to that. It was very difficult to imagine, black leaders that were competent, or female leaders that were surgeons or competent, because there was no examples of that.
Yeah.
And so it is important to have examples that taught me that. And it's important to have, people talking out against one specific, brand, especially if it's an extremist brand.
Yeah.
And they're probably diverting a lot, but the way my mind works, I see these associations, and to me, even the extreme, the extreme right and the extreme left are, to me, equally kind of dangerous if no one's challenging them.
Yeah.
And so,
well, I just find it fascinating because, again, what I love about this show is I can piece childhood to present day, and you have the most, and I think I have a qualified opinion on this because I work with so many businesses, the most diverse staff that we've worked with. And whether that's not intentional or not, it's just amazing that you could be born and raised into this society of segregation. Thankfully, it sounds like your father really gave you a different mindset. And then fast forward, later on, and you're able to build a diverse company of people.
Yeah, we have a very diverse group. I'm not looking specifically to make it diverse to be diverse.
Yeah.
I want to get the best people around for the best job. And if you've had a tough background, then I will give you more leeway if you've got a good attitude.
Yeah.
But I don't care if you're black, white, male, female, whatever. I think that applies to everyone.
Yeah.
And I think that's worked well for us.
Yeah. So it sounds like you had a good relationship with your parents growing up.
Yeah.
Tell me about work ethic, because I've always admired your work ethic. Where do you think that really started from? Was that instilled from your parents as well?
Yeah, I think most people pick that up from their parents and whoever's really important in their lives. And so my dad worked really hard. My mom helped him a lot. And she was Scottish. She was a Scottish Episcopal. My father's parents were Russian Jews, or actually from Lithuania. And so it was a crazy mix. But they both had different kinds of ways of getting to the same place in terms of having a very strong work ethic and also having a fair amount of guilt if things were going too well.
You really have a diverse background with your parents and family and where you're born. How did they end up in Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe?
Well, as I said, Rhodesia was a British Commonwealth country. My mother's mom had moved there for a variety of reasons, and part of it, she was getting away from an abusive husband at one point, and then had another husband, and part of it was health reasons as well for her. She had a lot of lung issues, and the weather in Zimbabwe is tremendous. There's a lot like Southern California. And so she was there for a variety of reasons. My father's parents were Russian Jews who were leaving Eastern Europe because of the pogroms, and the Jews were getting killed and persecuted, so they just wanted out. And some of the ships said America, some said Africa, and they just wanted out. And so they went to Southern Africa, and that's how they ended up there. Wow. And the two of them met, and, for the similar kind of reasons of bigotry, both sets of parents were like, no, that ain't happening. You guys aren't getting together, but they did anyway. So.
Yeah. And thank goodness they did. So childhood in Zimbabwe, you mentioned you played tennis. The war that you experienced, was that in Zimbabwe or was that in South Africa?
It was in Zimbabwe. There was what would now be calling a freedom fighter war, but at the time it was labeled a terrorist war.
And how old were you when you started understanding what was going on?
I think you understand that when you're pretty young. I mean, when you're even before teenage years, things are different because there was a lot of security around, and people you knew were going into the army, and some of them weren't coming back. And as a tennis player, I got exposed to older kids who had gone into the army, and it changed them in different ways, almost always for the worse. And so it was a different kind of environment to grow up in. You grew up around weapons, even in the schools, and so.
Would you guys have weapons on? The school would have weapons?
Well, the schools would have. And even in South Africa, I think they call it civic action or something. So you'd learn to shoot weapons, and they'd have a shooting range at the school. And so it was just, I guess, part of what they considered growing up and learning how to defend yourself. And it wasn't really like there was no part of it, was there a macho part of it or an ego part of it? It was mostly just a security issue.
Yeah. Part of, I guess, life and being prepared for something that could happen.
I think a variety of reasons. I think they're trying to prepare us, their definition of growing up to be a real adult or a real man, whatever that meant.
Yeah. You mentioned also you did karate growing up as a kid?
Yeah, when I was a young kid, I was really into karate, and my sensei, my instructor, was also a tennis coach, and that was my entree into tennis actually was through karate.
Oh, wow.
But I think that was really one of my most important influences in life, in that he was really great about teaching the discipline and the philosophy around karate, which, as you know, because you were really into it, really centered around being strong and confident without being a bully and without being an asshole about it.
Yeah.
And so I think that stood me well in life about being prepared, being confident, but not being overconfident. And also never underestimating your opponent. I mean, as you know, that's a huge issue. Never underestimate your opponent.
Ever. You will lose badly.
That's right. You get cocky, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
Right. And I think those are important life lessons. I mean, I've got 4 young kids now, and they did not. I introduced them a little bit to martial arts, and they didn't really take to it. And I didn't want to push it on them. Maybe I should have. I don't know. But those are kind of life lessons you wish you hope your kids learn, and if it's not through karate, then at least through other ways, because I think that stands you in great stead throughout life.
Yeah. I completely agree. And there's one I'd add on to that, and it's be adaptable.
Be adaptable, yeah.
That's a big one. But yeah, I mean, even more in the last, I think, 5 years, I've applied the lessons from martial arts in my life and business than even when I was competing at my most, because as you get older, you have more responsibility, more things to do.
Like what examples?
I think the resiliency in business, in being adaptable of if things go wrong, are you going to crumble in that moment?
Mm-hmm.
And I compare it to really when I lost in karate, and I got beat pretty badly before, really beaten up badly, embarrassed a few times, where it kind of makes you go back and rethink, like, I'm not as strong as I think I am. I really have to keep working harder. And the same way in business, that when you take a big loss, either financially, a team, you're going to let it knock you down or keep moving forward, and definitely remaining disciplined. So those go a long way.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think one of the things that I drive my team a little bit crazy sometimes is that I'm very comfortable being uncomfortable, or being uncomfortable in semi-chaos where we don't know exactly how we're going to get there, but we just know it's going to work out. And we say, how's it going to work out? I'm not quite sure right yet, but it'll play out. Now, obviously, we want to be prepared as much as possible, but sometimes life throws you the curveballs, and you just got to make the best of whatever situation it is. And like the terminology I always use is sometimes we've just got bad options in front of us. Let's just pick the least bad of all the bad options. And that's all you can do, right? And move on.
Another gentleman we had on the show, Brian Scott, I love his quote. It says, it's either going to work out or it's going to work out. And I like that because there's no other option. There's no other way. I was going to save this question for later on in the interview, but we can hit it now. I'm glad you talked about that because you are very comfortable with being uncomfortable. Talk to me about, how do you manage stress? Because I've had the chance to work behind the scenes with you a lot and get to see the shitstorm that comes with being an owner and having hundreds of employees and thousands of patients. How does Jonathan manage stress? Like, I imagine you have it, but it doesn't seem to control you. It could be off there, but shine a little light on that for me.
Jordan, I don't really think about stress that much. I don't have a specific plan to deal with stress or to relieve stress. I think working out inherently helps that, but I'm not doing that to relieve stress. I'm doing it because I like to work out.
Yeah.
And maybe those two are tied, just I'm not aware of it. But especially lifting weights, I think when you're pushing heavy iron or you're working out really intensely, you get those endorphins going and nothing really matters at that point, right? Yep. Except completing that goal, that mile, that run or whatever it is. I think underneath it all, if you're confident that you're going to handle it, whatever it becomes, that you'll be okay long term. And I think maybe that's part of a bigger picture. I'm not sure. I haven't given that a tremendous amount of thought. But I do believe, I think if you've got your life together and your family's together and you get along well with your spouse and you're just happy where you are, it's like, well, we live in America. I mean, how bad are things really, really going to get? If things went terribly at business and you lost the business, in a worst case scenario, one of my friends who's a really smart guy in business has a saying, something that goes like, take that worst scenario that you can think of for whatever's going on at the time, and then kind of live in it. And look around, and what does it feel like, and what's it going to be? And yeah, you're going to be okay. You probably, I mean, if it's a life-threatening situation, maybe not. But for the most part, whatever that bad situation is, live in it. Okay, yeah, it's bad, but you're going to be okay, and you're going to move on. Life's going to continue, and you've still got the good stuff in your life. And you don't want those bad things to happen, but if it does, it's not the end of the world. It's okay.
I think that's phenomenal advice. And it triggers me to think about, I've always had anxiety since I was a little kid. I didn't know I had bad anxiety until I was an adult. And I started meditating 4 years ago, on and off. And then I started daily meditating 3 years ago. And what that showed me was most of my anxiety was living in a future that didn't exist. It was the concept of Again, it could be, okay, simple example, a client. I'm worried we're going to lose this client and we're going to lose X amount of money each month. So what if we lose the money?
You're probably going to be okay.
We're going to be okay.
Yeah.
We're going to be okay. Now, you might take a hit for a month or two, but am I just going to shut down my business forever because I lost one client? No, but I would let that snowball, and that's a small example, but what...
And maybe you'll learn something from it.
I definitely would.
You
learn
lost a
something.
client for a reason. Maybe you could have done nothing, but maybe there is something that you did or didn't do, and you can learn from it and be better.
Exactly.
Yeah. How long are you meditating?
I do 10 to 15 minutes a day. I use the Calm app, and it's a guided meditation. I sit down. I typically do it right after lunch. I did it right before our interview. What's it, 2:30 right now? I did it around 1:15. It was 11 minutes. I lock in. I have a little yoga mat. But I also had a misconception that meditation was you have to like sit legs crossed, eyes closed, humming like this. I've meditated in the car, subway,
Really?
walks, bikes, trains. It's just about locking in and giving that time to really breathe. The breath is very important. A lot of times in society, we hold our breath. We tense up. You're a martial artist as well. Without breathing in martial arts, you're going to pass out or lose. One of the two is going to happen. So that's where the meditation has really helped me lock in. And I just 10, 15 minutes a day. And sometimes I don't use the app. Last week I was outside at night. It was beautiful. I could see the stars. I just literally shut everything off for 15 minutes and I just breathed, looked at the stars, and that's that. And sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not.
Well, I'm going to have to talk to you about that offline because my mind is like buzzing with, and I've definitely got some level of ADD. And, you know, I've struggled with getting into meditation because my head's just going everywhere.
So on that note, have you always been that way? And before you answer, the reason I ask that is, again, getting to work with you, you cannot walk through a hallway without getting pulled by every person on that floor. I've seen that. So I think part of it is people are inundating you with ideas, and you also have a lot of your own ideas. Were you always that way of kind of brain being all over the place?
I think so. Yeah. I think some folks are just born that way, and other people just learn to deal with it better than I've learned to deal with it. But yeah, I can be super focused when I need to be, especially like if I'm doing surgery or if I'm doing a very specific task. Like I used to love working in the ER, and I didn't care what is going on in that ER. When I was doing my training at Grady Hospital, it was very much like a third world country environment there before they got the new physical location that they have. But I loved it down there because I could really just kind of focus in on one thing at that time. But there was an acute situation with a very defined goal. Yeah. But like to sit there and, as you said, close your eyes and just meditate like this, to me, that's just really hard.
It's extremely challenging. And the first 6 months I did it, I hated it. I had a good year where it was smooth. I was locked in. It was motivating. This year, from January to June, I hated it. Not one day did I.
Really?
Not one.
You still kept doing it?
Day. Yeah, because again, going back to the martial arts background, I have found the secrets to success in life. It is consistent, repeatable, daily action. That, I don't care what it is. If you do something every day and you keep training. Now, you have to take note and get constructive criticism, and obviously don't be egotistical about it. But if you do something every day, you're gonna see the benefits.
Well.
You're gonna see the benefits. So it makes sense. But also, as you can probably tell by now, I love dissecting people's personalities. Seems like you thrive under pressure. You like pressure.
I'm not seeking it out, but I do think that's when you sift out what people are like. I think I was talking about this earlier about, I was having lunch with a buddy of mine today, actually, and we were talking about this, that I think when people are under stress or things are not going well, all right, so you've got problems at work or problems at home or problems with the kids, you're tired or you're hungry or you've got a physical ailment, that's when I think people's true personalities really come out more, because they're kind of pissed off at the world or at something in specific, and then something minor happens in another environment at work or personal, and then you really see what people are like and whether they flare up or not. And I catch myself. I know if things are really stressed at work or there's real problems or I'm really tired and and hangry or whatever it is, I know I can be more short with the kids. And I'm like, I try to catch myself, but I'm not 100% on that for sure.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's when you really see what people are like, right? Because if something's going well in every aspect of your life, and you're on vacation, and you're rested, and you're well, and you've got a great relationship with your significant other, and you've got a great sex life, and how can you not be in a good mood and be nice to people? I mean, seriously. Seriously. But it's like if they lose your reservation and they don't have the right room for you and you haven't eaten, and that's when you really find out how people handle those situations.
Yeah. That's funny. That really makes me think of putting people through tests, like having, like slightly putting them under pressure to see how they respond.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, like I've read stuff where, people who are dating will sometimes do that, right? Get the waiter to screw something up or to spill something, or just to see, okay, how's this guy or this girl gonna react to that?
That's a good idea.
Which I think
though.
is I think staging something like that is not a great idea. So I'm not advocating for that, but I can see where the psychology behind it comes from. I think if you just spend time with people, those scenarios will come up from time to time. And yes, how do you treat other people that you're not trying to impress? How are you treating the wait staff? How are you treating the valet people? How are you treating the check-in people? Especially when you're tired. All right, that's how you really see what people are like.
When people are tired and hungry, it strips away every mask and facade they have on. I'm an asshole when I'm hungry, man.
Especially, I like to eat, man. So it's like, you get me tired and hungry and it's testing me, I know.
In my friend group, just yesterday, my friend sent me a picture. And it was just this guy with like a knife and an angry look. And it's like, when I've not had food for 30 minutes. And they all know when I go silent, don't talk to me. I need my food. Well, that was a great tangent to go on, because it's just, I'd love to hear kind of how you think and philosophize about, I don't even know if that's a word, philosophize? Your philosophy on things and mindset behind stuff. Going back to childhood. And where how you're raised and things like that. The martial arts. Okay, so martial arts led you to tennis. Walk me through that, because tennis is what got you to the United States.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure what started that. My folks never pushed me into it. I never had many lessons. I had a few lessons from the guy who was really a martial arts sensei. I mean, he was a karate sensei. And I just started hitting the ball against the tennis wall for hours and hours and into the dark. And when it got dark, I would go closer to the wall and just be volleying for hours and hours. And I'm not sure what drove me to that, but I just had that passion and I wanted to be as good as I could be. And did real well with that on a junior level. I moved to South Africa and did well in South Africa also. And for us, I mean, coming from Zimbabwe to South Africa was a huge change. I mean, South Africa was much more bigger, much more sophisticated. For us, that was like the big time. It's interesting how everything in life is like relative, right?
Yeah.
So when you're in America looking at South Africa is not exactly the huge megalopolis, okay? But coming from Zimbabwe, South Africa really was.
Yeah. Do you have any siblings?
I've got an older sister that still lives in South Africa now.
Yeah.
So
you guys moved, so you moved to South Africa at 17?
I moved to South Africa when I was 14.
14.
And then came to the US when I was 17.
Okay, so 14, 17 is when tennis really was, would you say like that was your focal point for life?
Yeah, I really wasn't very good at doing anything else. I didn't go to parties. I didn't have a girlfriend. I didn't.
Fully on sports.
I didn't study at all, really. I was a terrible student in school. I mean, I just loved math and science and geography, so I paid attention in class, but I barely even took my books home with me. I was a terrible student. But I think it's one of the great things about America. That it allows you like these second chances. I think if you're in Europe or Asia and in most countries in the world, if you screw up really badly in high school, it's very difficult to recover. It's very difficult to recover to the point that you can go to a really, really good med school like I did, and then go on to do greater things.
Yeah.
I think if you screw up that bad in high school, even in South Africa, it would be very difficult to get back on track into that realm like we were able to here. And I think the 4-year college program allows people to experiment, allows you to fail at the beginning and then recover.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, it does take longer to train here. But I think it's a better system. You're making decisions at a later stage, and you're able to figure stuff out later.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating that you were not the star pupil that someone might think. If you see who you are today with all the medical knowledge and looking back, can you speak on just it being okay to not have everything figured out? Because I talk to a lot of people, teenagers, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, that just feel like, I don't have it figured out yet. Like I'm behind and things like that. And to hear from you, and it makes me think of my dad, who did not start studying medicine until he's either 28 or 30 and has built a thriving medical company over the last 20 years.
Yeah, as I said, that's one of the things. And there are not a lot of countries that allow you to do that at a later stage. And I've got a friend of mine who went through college and kind of goofed off a lot and was smoking a lot of things that he should or shouldn't have been smoking, and didn't study very much and didn't know what he wanted to do. And then like a year or two after graduation decided, he wanted to do medicine. So he went back and took some pre-med courses and got on track and went to a good med school and did radiology and became an interventional neuroradiologist. I mean, like, it's really amazing to be able to recover at a later stage in life and get on track like that. And so, I tell my kids, you don't have to have it all figured out. Now, I'm not advocating for that. I mean, I was always jealous of the people, like when I was doing my eye training, and, there were a couple of guys training with me, like one guy and one girl who was training with me, and they knew from like age 7 or 8 they wanted to be eye doctors. And I was jealous. I was like, okay, you knew. Like, I thought I knew I wanted to be tennis, so for me that was easy, but I had to make a change. But they knew what they wanted to do, and they're able to keep that on track. So they weren't confused. They weren't thinking about stuff. They knew exactly where to put their energies from an early stage, and that worked out great. But I think that's pretty rare. And if you think back on, like, why would someone at age 7 or 8 decide they want to be an eye doctor? It's got nothing to do with being an eye doctor. It's got to do with, this is my opinion, it's got more to do with the person they interacted with. If that same person had been, an accountant or a soccer coach or a karate sensei or a dentist, then that's what they would have wanted to do, because they probably connected with that person and said, wow, that person's having fun, they're happy, maybe they're making good money, whatever it was that triggered these positive attributes that they found attractive, and go along with that person who maybe mentored them or whatever the situation was. And, I think that holds true in life a lot in general. I'm not sure that it matters that much that I ended up being an eye doctor. I could have been another kind of doctor. I think I could have been an accountant. I could have been, not sure I would have done it really well as a lawyer, just because I don't want to read all day long, okay? But I think there are a lot of other things I could have done and been pretty happy and hopefully been reasonably successful at it. And I think we're so subspecialized in our world right now that people end up in a small place and they think, well, that's the only niche I could have been happy in. And I don't think that's true. I think happy people end up being happy, doing pretty much whatever. And successful people will end up being successful doing a variety of different things. And you look back on how you get to where you've got, and a lot of the times it's a specific individual. And for me, there was one specific doctor at medical school who was an eye doctor that I thought was phenomenal. And I thought he really cared about his patients. He was very good technically. And he was having fun. And he was making good money, and it was like, that's the whole package.
Yeah.
And
he showed you the path.
Yeah, and if I'd met someone who was an orthopedic surgeon in that same realm, I probably would have done orthopedics or neurosurgery or something different. And so I think that's where the mentors really do become very important. And people that you can relate to, and that goes back to something we talked about earlier. I mean, having people that look and feel like us, especially for the minority communities, does become important.
Yeah.
For everyone to have really good mentors to help guide you.
Yeah. That just sparked something that I think you are spot on with that. And it just goes to show that I think as adults, we have a responsibility to be a good example for people because, like you said, you don't know who you're going to impact. And that could make the person go left or right. And it goes a long way. And you talk about the representation. My wife came home a few months ago. She joined another company. And she said she was so impacted because there was an executive Black woman that gave a speech. And she came back and she was like, Jordan, it's the first woman that I've seen at our company that was like, I look like her and I can be her. And that like pierced me because for the longest time, I'm like, no, we have all these people that could be inspirations, but it's like, no, she doesn't look like me. And me living in America, like as a white man, that you're typically going to get way, way more of that. So I never really thought about it, but that had a big impact on me. And I've thought about that a lot since.
Yeah, and that's a whole different discussion because I'm not sure, how you fix that easily. But I think the country's definitely trying.
Oh, I absolutely think so. And I think that's a whole other long conversation to get on, but just going to the point of like, hey, wherever you're at in your life, yourself, myself, anyone, like we do have responsibilities to help and mentor and pass on to the next generation.
Yeah, and I've lived in different parts of the world for periods of time, and I think the U.S. for all of its problems and issues that we've got, and inequities and issues, it's still the best place to live, and still people are trying. We try and do something that's quite amazing in this country. If you think about it, you're trying to take a country of 350 more or less million people, and you've got significant minority percentages, right? You've got 20-odd% African American, and you've got a sizable Hispanic population, and you've got a little bit over 50% whites, and then you've got an Asian population as well. And you're trying to mix everyone together now. And there are not a lot of countries in the world, especially big countries, that are doing that without having either major problems or having some big overarching, dominant, authoritarian government. And so I don't think people realize, at least I think it's a huge, difficult task that we're trying to do. All right. I mean, trying to take those disparate groups and get people to work together and say, what does it mean to be an American? And we haven't figured that out yet.
No, but I agree with you. I mean, my family is from Europe, so we're first generation here in the United States. So I've had the chance to go to other countries. I've talked to other people. I mean, I hear these things, and I agree with you. I think also it's a melting pot. I mean, think of Atlanta alone, the amount of diversity that we have here. I think it's a beautiful thing. But when people don't speak the same language and they don't have the same culture, like you're gonna have a little bit of clashes. But I agree with you. For the most part, it's great. Like,
no, you're right. And this office we're sitting in, it's just very close to Buford Highway, right? Which is
so diverse.
Which is a 10-mile stretch. For those of you who don't live in Atlanta, Buford Highway is around 7-10 miles long? What is it?
About 7 to 10 miles, yeah.
7 to 10 miles long, and it is just populated with small mom and pop restaurants, a lot of them Asian, several Hispanic, a lot of Hispanics, and there are 2 or 3 websites devoted just to the restaurants on Buford Highway. And that kind of diversity, and that's what my wife and I love to do.
It's famous.
It's very rare that we choose to go to like a fancy restaurant. Mm-hmm. We want to go to these authentic mom and pop owned places from Korea or Vietnam or wherever it is. Or I just think that's really cool that we've got that in the city.
Me too. Atlanta. I mean, I've gone all around the country. Atlanta's still my favorite. Where I was born in Florida, but I just love Atlanta. Can't beat the diversity. Speaking of America, let's talk about how you came here. So South Africa, moved there 14, there for 3 years. Walk me through. You clearly become very good at tennis. Quick side note, when did you have your growth spurt?
I was always tall, and I was, even at 17, I was close to my current height is around 6'4". So but I was a beanpole. When I first came here, I was about 6'4", and I was 156 pounds.
Oh my God.
So I came to college. I came to college, and they'd never seen me before. They'd just known that I'd played some international tournaments. I'd won a few matches against some ranked people, so they gave me a scholarship. And,
Yeah.
and they took one look at me and they're like, weight room,
Get
Sustakel. Now, so for those who don't know, Sustakel, I don't know if it still exists as a product, but it's one of those liquid protein drinks they would give to mostly elderly folks to give them lots of calories and lots of protein.
Yeah.
But the bodybuilders would use them. And so they would just give me cases of Sustakel. And so I went to the weight room and woke up all my muscles to actually grow some muscles and drank a lot of protein and put on like 30 pounds in the first 8 months or something.
That's amazing.
And then I had no clothes, right?
Yeah,
I had zero clothes that fit me.
And you're still growing as a teenager. Okay, so how did you...
So I came on a tennis scholarship, and I had no idea what I was getting into. I mean,
had you been to the United States before?
Never come to the U.S.
Okay.
Didn't even know what college was really like. I mean, I just came with 2 suitcases and some tennis rackets.
By yourself?
On myself. And I'm thinking about that now because my eldest is 16, so she's not a lot younger than I was when I just left. And I'm like, ooh. So I had no idea what I was getting into. I didn't even bring like pillows and sheets and stuff and towels. I didn't know how to bring all that stuff.
Clothing.
I just brought tennis stuff. That's all I had, and 1 pair of jeans, and that I showed up. And luckily, the secretary at the tennis center, Bridget, was just phenomenal. She took me under her wing, and she's like, "You didn't what? You didn't bring what? I didn't what?" I said, "You need help." And I came in December because our school year there ends in December. I came in December, and as soon as I got there, everyone left because they left for the holidays. So now I was stuck in this dorm room of international students, and like no one else was around. And this is not the day of this is before cell phones and internet, right? So even making a call home was insanely expensive. We didn't have money. So it was several months before I even spoke to my parents again. And so I was crying. I was just crying. I had no idea what I was doing. I felt like I didn't know what to expect. And I was in Nashville at Vanderbilt, and Bridget and her friends really took me under their belt. And there was another family, a guy called David Patterson, who I remain friends with to this day. I still speak to him routinely and see him. And he grew up in Nashville and took me under his wing. I taught him a little bit of tennis, and he took care of me. And after a very short period of time, the first semester, for a variety of reasons, I decided to give up the tennis. I only wanted to play if I really thought I was going to be in the top 5 or 10 in the world, and I had a bit of a knee injury, and I was like, okay, I got to do something different. And I don't even know how that changed because it was so weird because I never thought about doing anything else. And all of a sudden it was like, okay, that's not going to work. And so David actually introduced me to a small school called Swanee, University of the South, small little liberal arts school in the mountains between Chattanooga and Nashville. And I went there, and they gave me like a provisional scholarship and said, if you keep your grades up, then we'll pay for you.
And about what age are you here?
So I was 18 at that point, right, when I started there, and took some summer schools, and was able to graduate when I was 20. But while I was there, it was just a great experience for me because they took me from being like kind of confused tennis player to, okay, you're going to focus on your academics. They still wanted me to play tennis. I didn't have to, but I played tennis. But it was a Division III school, so it was a different like kind of level of tennis there.
Yeah.
And so I played some tennis there, but I really got involved with the ambulance crew, and that got me interested in medicine. But it was a very, very strong liberal arts school. So if you're going to do well, you had to learn to write reasonably well in any course. So even if you were taking philosophy or any other class, history, you had to be able to write cleanly. And my writing skills were not great going in, so I really worked on that really hard. And in my senior year, I actually took a 300-level writing class. There were just 5 of us. There were 4 English majors and me. And and you're writing a paper and critiquing someone else's paper for every class. So you're writing every day for a couple of hours. And it taught me also that even if that's not your genius, writing was not my genius. Okay? Mathematics was really what I enjoyed. That's what I was good at. It came very, very easily to me. But even if you're not really, really gifted in a certain area, you can become pretty competent if you just stay with it. Like you were saying earlier, if you stick with something and do it consistently and learn a little bit each day and a little bit more and a little bit more. And I got to the point where my writing was decent. I would never say it's great, but it was absolutely decent and acceptable. And I learned to write concisely and do well. Not that I'm ever going to be a great writer, but to me it was a great lesson about something I thought, and I knew I was actually pretty terrible at, and didn't come easily to me. But just plugging away and taking the negative feedback. I mean, the first paper, and I remember it like yesterday, the first paper I wrote for that 300 level class, there was a visiting professor, and the feedback I got from him, he ripped me in front of the whole class. And I was devastated. And he was harsh. And even in retrospect, he was like more harsh than he needed to be. And he actually apologized afterwards for it. But it was good lesson. It was like, yeah, I've got to improve. I've got to improve a lot to be acceptable. And so that, put it on my radar to say, all right, every day I'm going to have to do this. Yeah. And at the end of that year, it was, huge improvement.
It sounds like it wasn't just an improvement in the writing, but it almost reshaped your outlook on doing something you're not good at.
Yeah. I think it's okay to embrace things.
Being uncomfortable.
Being uncomfortable, yeah. I mean, I put myself in that situation. And now, so truth be told, I took it in my senior year because I'd already applied to med school. My grades were really good, and I was fully expecting to bomb this class.
You were going to BS it.
No. I was like, okay, if I get a C in this class, it's not going to affect my grade for med school.
I see. So it was okay.
But I ended up getting a B in the class or whatever it was. But
best B of your life.
Oh yes, I worked so hard for that B. But he was tough. But it was the best thing that could happen. And as you said, it's not just like learning to write; it's learning to take something that you're really not very good at and work your ass off at it and become okay at it. You're a B, but that was, to me, it was an accomplishment. But it also stands you in good stead the rest of your life. I don't care if you're a math major or a doctor. You need to learn how to communicate in writing if you need to. So I routinely look at even some of the marketing stuff. We'll look at and say, yeah, you got 20 words there. You only need 10. Yes.
My favorite quote, one of my favorite quotes is from Mark Twain. I would have written a shorter letter, but I didn't have time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There's a great quote, and he may have borrowed it from these guys. I think it's Russell and Whitehead. I may be getting the names a little bit mixed up. Were two of the early mathematicians in England. And they were the guys that kind of figured out some of the theory behind calculus. And they had a unique way of communicating. They would work on their own, figure something out, write it down, wrap it up, put it on the other guy's doorstep, ring the bell, and walk away, more or less. Yeah. And that's how the story goes. I'm sure it's a little bit different. And the one time one of them figures out a real breakthrough, and he writes it all out, and he puts a note on the top, and he says the same thing. He says, sorry this is so long. I didn't have time to make it short. And so whenever we were doing mathematic proofs or whatever, we always had that in mind. Like the most elegant, the most beautiful ones are the ones that are very short and concise and to the point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because being able to communicate is, I would argue, the most important thing for two human beings to be able to do. I mean, think, you're a married man, you've got children, you have employees. What's a root of a lot of issues? Communication. It goes.
I think right now in my house it's hormones.
Okay, that's
We've got
true.
4 teenagers there. They're all a year apart. I mean, it's insane.
It's true, and even then, it still comes back to communication because they don't feel heard. They don't feel listened to.
No, you're right. You're not listening to me. I'm like,
you don't understand
I am.
me.
I'm just disagreeing with you. That's
really,
all.
the truth is they don't understand themselves right now.
But then I always think back and think about the mirror versus looking out the window versus the mirror, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm in a business group that's helped me a lot. And I think that's the one thing that's helped me more than anything is to look in the mirror. Mm. So whenever I get frustrated with the kids, you're saying, okay, what was I like at that age?
Yeah.
And there it wasn't pretty.
Yeah.
So
What's the business group you just mentioned?
It's a business group called YPO, it's the Young Presidents Organization. And we're in smaller groups or forum groups.
You've been in that for a long time.
Yeah, they helped me a lot. I think a lot of people join to try and get help on the business side, but they end up getting more help on the non-business side. And that certainly has been true for me.
Yeah.
So.
I joined a networking group 9 months ago, and exactly what you just said, came for the business, the money, stayed for the people. The community is powerful.
Yeah, because it's almost like for me, it's really been like a support group.
Yeah.
Right. And so folks are going through certain similar issues and have thought through things. That,
and I'm not sure the people in your group, but like the ones in mine, I don't know them from anyone else. They're not related to my family, my friends, or anything like that. Correct. They're a separate group that I can talk to just about that stuff. So when I'm there, I'm there. When I'm not, I'm not. It's
no, that's true. And also, I think sometimes you need a group of people in a supportive way that'll call you out on your own BS.
Oh yeah.
So to be able to say, really? You want to rethink that? Like, ooh.
And you also respect them for what they've done in their life. So you know it's a validated opinion.
Yeah.
Okay, jumping back to the timeline. You are, let's see, we're at the university, you graduate, you had a focus on mathematics as well at the other university. So when did medicine, because you told me about the English course, you already knew you were going to med school your senior year. Walk me through that when you
Well,
pivoted.
I didn't know I was going into med school till I got accepted, because I actually applied to do actuarial science as well.
And real quick.
So an actuary is the men and women who figure out statistics and probability, and the guys who are running insurance companies who are figuring out if you get life insurance, how much are they going to charge you? All right. Or if you get auto insurance, let's create a policy and figure out what's the odds of how many crashes are there going to be, what's going to cost. And so it's all about numbers and statistics, and I was really interested in that. And so I was thinking of going into that field. And I've actually got several family members that are in that field. It's a very small niche field in the world, but I think it's really awesome.
And when did you said ER or ambulance you were working at?
So I was working on the ambulance crew that was up on the mountain in Swanee, Tennessee.
What was that like?
It was interesting because it was mostly very, very, very good for me. It was a little bit isolating because it's small. I didn't have family around in the U.S., so it's a little isolated from that perspective. It was a little isolating also in that there were very few Jewish kids on campus. But overall, the dominating feeling I get from it was supportive and guiding. And it was a tremendous environment to question your beliefs, political beliefs, whatever. And so they'd routinely have, I think it was on Wednesdays, they would have something in the student commons and have debates on very controversial issues, whether it was affirmative action or abortion, or one time it was during the apartheid year, so there was some race issues that they were debating, and it was done in an environment that you could really listen to both sides, and that really did help shape a lot of my attitudes and help me reevaluate a lot of things I'd grown up with. Wow. And it pains me to see what's going on in campuses now, because I don't think there's a lot of that going on right now. I think it's a lot more dictatorial in terms of this is what you're going to think, and if you don't, then you're going to be out. You're going to be out of the group, or you're canceled.
Yeah.
And I think we need, in my opinion, I think we need less of the canceling and more, okay, let's just talk about this.
Coming back to communication too.
Yeah, it's true.
Of healthy, like, hey, just because you disagree with me doesn't make you a bad person. And in fact, having someone challenge your beliefs is some of the best things you can do, because it makes you think about what, like you said, makes you reflect on your own beliefs and fight for what you believe in.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes sometimes people can be off the scale. I did have, I had a couple of instances where things were a little weird. I had one guy came up to me once and said, well, I know you're from South Africa, so I understand that you get it. You understand that the blacks can't really run the place or do anything.
Oh my God!
And he said, I've got something to show you. And long story short, he takes me back to his dorm room, and he's got like swastikas everywhere. And I'm like, dude.
So far off.
So far, I take out my Star of David, and I'm like, we've got a problem here.
Oh my God.
This is not going to go well.
Oh.
And so, yeah, there are people on the extremes that I think can really mess things up in life.
Yeah, I think so. So where did the med school and the interest come from? And
I think that for me, it was a mix of things. I really loved being on the ambulance crew and doing things with my hands because, and we weren't super sophisticated. I mean, at that time, we weren't even putting in IVs. And right now, the EMT pluses and the paramedics are doing a lot more. But I felt like I was helping people. I liked that part of it. And I think I also wanted to have a profession that I could take with me no matter what. Because when we moved from Zimbabwe to South Africa, it was very difficult for us financially as a family because my father had to give up everything. And so they were forced to sell the house and the cars and anything expensive and essentially put it in a bank account that got controlled by the government, just took it over. And so he started in his 50s with nothing, and he had no profession. And so it was difficult for him financially. I mean, he never made more than about $20,000 a year. And so I think that was ingrained into me that, okay, I need to have a profession so that if something weird happens, I've got some sort of backup.
Yeah.
And so the profession for me was, in part because I just loved doing that. And I loved helping people. I loved the medical side of things. And part of it was having a profession as something that couldn't be taken away from me.
Yeah.
I think that's what drove me in that direction.
That makes sense, especially seeing your parents have a great life that you had in Zimbabwe and they have it taken from you. So I can imagine that was painful to see.
I think when you're younger, you don't think about it, in those same terms. But looking back on it, I think it would be very difficult for them. It was a difficult time for a lot of people then. I mean, there was just a lot going on at the time. It was difficult for people who were transplanted like my parents, and it was difficult for the local blacks who had to go through a lot of changes. And the local blacks that belonged to the wrong tribe. In Zimbabwe, it was taken over by Mugabe. He became, a dictator, and he was in power for more than 30 years. And if you belonged to the wrong tribe or of your political opponent, life was not good if you were allowed to survive. I mean, they killed a lot of people. And so you went from one really bad system, that was this colonial white rule system, to a black ruled authoritarian system that was a dictatorship essentially. And the local people got messed up in the middle by both sides.
So it's one extreme to the other, almost. The balance from there. Wow. So so you finished the college degree at the school in the mountains. Which medical school did you go to?
I went back to Vanderbilt for medical school.
Okay.
And
early 20s?
Now? I started when I was 24.
Okay.
So I was still pretty young at the time for med school. And Vanderbilt was great for me. It was a great med school. A lot of it also was financial because I was not American. So I couldn't take out any loans. At the time, I think there were FSLs and GSL loans, but they were for Americans. And almost all of the scholarships were tied into being an American or being from a certain part of America. And so funding it financially was very, very difficult for me. And I went through a lot of different things to get the funding. And my friend David Patterson had helped me out, some of it financially himself, and some of it introduced me to people. And I had this whole network of people in the Southeast that were helping me with $100 checks, $200 checks.
Wow. Were these loans, were they kindness of their hearts?
That was kindness of their hearts. And, and I kept a lot of them. I've got a scrapbook, and I've got a lot of the letters and some of the canceled checks and stuff that I took photocopies of and stuff.
Wow.
And so that's what got me through school. And I was helping out and giving tennis lessons to people and doing stuff.
Yeah.
And so medical school was most stressful because of the money side of it. And I think that stayed with me my whole life in a negative way, because I learned to be pretty happy with very few material things. Mm. That was a good thing. But I think it's always been difficult for me to spend money on myself. I've got no problem spending money on other people, on my kids, my wife, whatever, but it's always been difficult for me to spend money on myself, because I feel like I just don't need it. I can be happy without it. But at some point, I think it's okay to say, all right, yeah, we can go to do something nice.
When did you have that realization?
Yeah, it's been fairly recent. And that's going back to that group I'm with. It's like, guys, like, you know, we had 3 kids. We had them back-to-back. They're like 13 months apart. And we'd had 3 kids. We were pregnant with the 4th one. And we still had no help in the house at all. And we didn't have much family help at all. And so, you know, it was a busy, stressful time. And we had the resources to get some help. And we're like, no, we don't really need it. And the guys in my business group were like, just get your shit together. Seriously, you know, if you don't get someone to come and help you, at least part-time, we will get someone to go and then help you. And so we did, and it changed our lives, because then we could actually get some sleep. Yeah. And spend more time with my wife. And it really changed our lives a lot. So that was the first big aha moment. Like, okay, you know, we didn't have any other big expenses in life. I don't drive fancy cars that are crazy fancy. I don't have a second house or a second home, or my car's got nearly 220,000 miles on it, and I love it. I'm not looking to get rid of it. And I'm happy with it. Yeah. You know, I mean, truly happy. I don't like have any yearnings for any of those things.
Yeah. You're a minimalist.
Listen, we still do some fun stuff. I took the kids skiing, so it's not like we're not doing anything. So that's an expensive holiday. But we pick and choose.
Yeah. But no, you're not attached to material things. I think it's a great thing. Like, a lot of times, and especially in the American culture, we have that. Like, it's all about things and stuff like that. I discovered minimalism 10 years ago, and it's this game. I got really into it. And it's this game where on day 1, you sell, give, or throw away one thing. You do it for 30 days. And it ends up being 467 things.
You mean do 1, then 2, then 3?
Every day.
Wow.
So one day for 2, then second day, 2 things. I made it to day 23 or 27. I can't remember. So I ended up giving away over 300 things, throwing away. And I've just kept that since. So, I mean, I kind of similar to you, obviously different upbringing, but not really attached to the material things. And it wasn't until I was with my wife where I realized, like, I don't spend money on myself. I put on other people. Like, wear my shoes out till they're broken, wear my clothing out till it's ripped, had the same car. And so it goes a long way. But on the flip side, I'll tell you what did it for me is when I hurt my back and I had to start spending money on therapy, I realized, I was like, I'm spending $500 to $1,000 a month on this stuff. Like, I could put that elsewhere. And it's like, no, you got to take care of yourself. Yeah. That's more important.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure that I've got the right balance on that yet. But that's definitely a work in progress for me. Yeah. And my wife's a good example. And she's the same way. She's very, very kind of down to earth and doesn't do she's not into the bling bling. And so we're very like-minded in that way. But I mean, we have those discussions about, okay, yeah, we could do more if we want to. What do we want to do?
Yeah. I also think you love your life.
Well, I love my life. And also what I think about a lot is, what example am I setting for my kids? And so, and you never know how they're going to take it. That's a different, I'll tell you a great story in a minute about that. But, you know, I always think about, okay, what example are we giving them? One of the things that we have that is really cool is I've got a really, really nice house. We bought it at the bottom of the recession in 2009, 2010. And it's a big house and it's a nice house. And I always wonder, like, wow, the kids this is what they've grown up in. They think this is normal. Not normal. So I worry about that, and I worry what kind of example I'm setting. But I also don't want them to have any crazy, problems around money. They should learn to have a healthy balance there. And I worry about, what kind of example I'm setting with that. Because I don't want to give them everything. Yeah. But I don't want them to feel like it's a big thing in their life either. So
Had they ever come to work with you?
Yeah, I had them. Yeah, I actually had one of them helping out at work this morning. I went in. I give every patient my cell phone number, and so they can text me. And I had a patient who did surgery on a couple of days ago, and her vision was good, but she was a little worried about something. I said, "Come on in, let me." So I wasn't supposed to be at work today, so I just went in to see her, and I took one of the kids, and she was very nervous and having trouble keeping her eyes open. So I had one of the kids come and help. Keep her eye open for me.
Good.
And so I've had them at work, not a lot, but I've had them at work to help check patients in. And you want them to have, I'm trying to instill some sort of work balance.
Yeah.
That's not just all about play. But there's always that issue of unintended consequences with the kids. And this is what my wife and I think about this a lot, like what example are we setting for the kids? And sometimes you think you got it covered, right? And you don't. So the greatest example of this was my eldest used to like really spicy food. And the one time we got some sushi and we were having it at home. And she always liked the avocado. So you can see where this is going, right? She takes this big lump of wasabi and she's about to put it in her mouth. And she's like, and I said, no, you really don't want to do that. It's going to be way too hot. It's going to be bad. So I'm trying to make this decision. Should I just physically grab it from her? Or should I just tell her not to do it? So I decided, something, it's not going to kill her, probably. Probably not going to kill her, right? I've never heard of someone dying from wasabi, all right? And so maybe this is going to be a great learning lesson if she decides to go down the wrong path. So I said, you're really not going to like that. It's going to be way too hot. Don't eat that. Bad decision. So, of course, she does it anyway. Faces like fuming, smoke coming out of her ears, kind of. And she doesn't cry, but hot. I'm already prepared. I've got some milk for her, and I just give her the milk. And I think this is going to help. And it takes her like a long time to recover. And I just very calmly said, well, okay, next time something comes up, maybe you'll listen to me. I mean, maybe you won't, but that'll be another decision you'll make. But perhaps it'll help you to remember this circumstance where I was pretty strong in my advice and you decided not to. And I think, I got this covered, man. I handled that like a pro, patting myself on the shoulder. My wife saying, oh, you did great. And then you have the law of the unintended consequences. What happens next? She won't touch anything spicy.
Oh, no.
So he's like, seriously? That's where we ended with this?
It backfired.
And she still doesn't really listen. So it's like, come on. So we've got the worst of both worlds, okay?
Sometimes people don't, they're not going to listen, they're not going to learn. There's nothing you can do about it.
But all you can do is try, right?
That's all we can do.
But it was a great learning experience for me because you think, oh, yeah, I did great. And not so much.
How old is she now?
She's now 16.
Yeah.
She's driving. It's scary.
Give her some more time. Maybe
another 10 years.
Yeah, give her another 10 years. People change. That's hilarious, though.
But talking about that, I mean, she's 16 and driving. I'm like, when I grew up, it was 18, and we thought that was young. And I just think driving at 16 is just too young.
I really agree with you as I've gotten older. I do. I think it's too young. I think the ages are all over the place. But yeah, 16 is way too young.
And she's doing great. She hasn't had any issues. But again, you look back, like, what were you like at 16? You really think you could drive a car in Atlanta traffic?
I was an arrogant asshole at 16. I know because I got tickets. And not good. I also think we should have you go for your driver's license test, like re-examine every 3 to 5 years. I don't think it should be, I don't even know how much it is now. I don't think you have to go again.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
I think especially when people get into the elder years, that's such a touchy subject, like taking away someone's ability to drive against their will. But sometimes it should be done, and it's not. And
it's for the safety of people on the road.
But how do you do that without infringing on their rights? I mean, tough.
You can't, and then you'd have just a ton of illegal driving.
Yeah,
technically. So, yeah, no, someone else's problem, not something we can solve right now. Okay, so jumping back to the timeline, med school. You go to med school. You meet a doctor there that's a great example for you, that has kind of a life that you admire, that said inspired you to go down was it the ophthalmology route or the LASIK route?
It was actually a combo. He was actually an oculoplastic surgeon, but he was in ophthalmology, but he specialized with surgery around the eye, so the eyelids and tumors and things like that. trauma around the eyeball.
Yeah.
He was, so I actually went into my, the way things work in eye training is that you always apply for your eye training 1 year ahead of when the training starts, because you need to do an internship year in the interim. And I only applied during my internship year. So you're still applying for a year in advance. So I had like a gap year. And so I got accepted to Emory, which was a really good program. And I had a gap year, and I decided to go and spend that year overseas, mostly in Israel at the time. Wow. And I wanted to learn the language. And like you'd mentioned this earlier when you were talking right now about learning the language. I think you really got to understand the language to understand people. And so, half of my family was from the Jewish side of my family, and I was raised Jewish, and I could read and write Hebrew, knew a few words, but really wasn't really conversational. When I was in college, I took German because I really trying to understand more. I took German for a variety of reasons, but one of them was to really understand, the German people better, especially after what happened in the Second World War. And I think learning the language really takes you to a different level of understanding of people. And so I actually went and lived in Israel for a while and had Hebrew instruction every day.
Wow.
And that was quite an experience. And that was actually the time when I got there. I think it was in July of 94, if I remember. And I think in August or sometime shortly thereafter was the first Iraqi war started. The Scud missile started coming over. And so it was an interesting time to be there. And they were preparing the places we were at, because I was out in the desert in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And they were preparing the hotels there to be hospitals. And so it was a very interesting time.
Wow. What kind of impact did that have on you studying and learning the language on a daily basis?
So the instruction there I thought was really, really good. And there were people from all over the world who had different primary languages. So there were South Americans who spoke Spanish, there were Russians who spoke Russian, there were some from Morocco who were French. And so the only real common language was Hebrew. And so they paired us with folks often from different backgrounds so that your common language is Hebrew. And so we learned pretty fast, especially when it's functional. If you're at a dinner table and you want the salt, you learn pretty fast how to ask for it. Okay? Yeah. So, but it was a great group of people, and it's such a complicated part of the world. And it was a lot of instruction, not just in Hebrew, but also in political science. Mm. So, and it wasn't like kind of geared towards like a pro-Israeli side. It was really, truly academic. Like, this is a complicated part of the world. Let's go back to where things started. And he has a viewpoint from an Arab viewpoint. He has the Israeli viewpoint or the Jewish viewpoint. And the more I learned, the more you realized it was confusing, and the more you realized you didn't know.
Yeah.
So
I feel like let me bring up another big topic, but that's a lot of life. Like, we don't always understand what people have gone through, where they come from. And you got to take your time to understand groups of people before you have opinions and pass judgment.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's especially with what's going on right now in the Middle East. Yeah. It's a very, very tough situation. And if you're truly objective about it, you can actually see both sides of it. I mean, you can understand, Palestinians wanting to live in a better environment. You can understand some Palestinians saying, "Oh, my parents or grandparents, used to live in Tel Aviv, and I want that land back." And you can understand the Israelis saying, "Hey, the Jews were here before Muhammad was born," and I think at some point, you hope the leaders can get together and say, we need an outcome that no one's happy with, but we can all live with.
Yeah,
and that right now that doesn't seem to be happening.
And going back to your point you made earlier, there's echo chambers of social media and propaganda.
Of course, yeah.
And it's brutal, and it pits people against one another.
Yeah, I mean, I found it very disappointing, when you had the terrible Hamas attack, and there were, 1,200 plus people who were killed and butchered and sliced open, and babies cut out of pregnant women, and the rape and the torture that was going on. And the first response on a lot of the campuses was anti-Israeli. Before there was even any response, it was just so. I think once you take a more dispassionate view of it, you need to be able to understand both sides of it all.
Yeah, I agree. So you study it in Israel for a year. You're studying Hebrew, a 3-year gap year, and after that you come back to Emory?
Came back to Emory and did my eye training, and that was difficult for me especially the first couple of years was really difficult for me.
In what way?
Because I wanted to be back in Israel, because I thought maybe I'd want to go live there. Also, I really wanted to do surgery, and the first couple of years of our training, we did almost no surgery.
Why is that?
The training made sense in retrospect, but at the time I found it to be very frustrating, at least for me, because it was mostly clinical, and I wanted to do more surgery. And I think they have changed the curriculum somewhat now, at least some programs have. And then the third year was very, very heavy on surgery.
Got it.
And so that's when I kind of was a lot happier and just in general, it just did a lot better. And then I finished my eye training in 94. And at that time, the laser that does LASIK had been developed in the US. So this laser that does LASIK was developed, I believe, in the 70s originally by IBM to etch microchips. And so someone said, okay, this laser can be accurate enough to take a small little microchip and etch pathways in there without having collateral damage. So someone smart said, oh, okay, but let's see if we can reshape somebody's cornea that way. And that's what they did. And they developed, the first eyes were done in the early 80s. It was 83, 84, if I remember correctly. And it was developed in the US, but then the FDA put it under controls for about 12 years or so, more or less. And being a device, it didn't have the same kind of control restrictions around the world. So other countries like Canada and the EU and Asian countries and Africa, they do have governing bodies that kind of dictate what drugs can be put on the market. But most of them don't have tight regulations on what devices can be put on the market. So if I want to take this pen and attach a little laser to it and say this is going to treat your glaucoma or treat your nearsightedness or whatever it is, it's a lot easier to do that around the world than in the US. It's going to have to go through full approval, which is going to take 10 plus years and gobs of money. And so the situation in 1994 was such that the laser had been used around the world for about 10 years, but not in the US. And there were a few sites that were using the laser, mostly not even with LASIK. They were doing PRK, which is using the laser in a different way, which was very different. And so there was no good mechanism in the US for surgeons to offer that to their patients. So a lot of patients in the US were flying up to Canada, or they were flying to Detroit and hopping over the border to Windsor, Canada, and getting a lot of surgery done with LASIK there. And that's where one of the first companies, TLC, got started. They set up shop in Windsor. So you would fly to Detroit, which was an internal flight, relatively cheap, take a taxi right to the clinic across the border. That was before 9/11, before the border controls were more tough. Yeah. And so I graduated in 94 and initially was thinking about doing retina, went through a few machinations, but ended up in South Africa where one of the two early pioneers for LASIK was there. And so his name was Giel Kritzinger. There was another doctor in Bogota in Colombia, South America, who was another one of the real early pioneers. And this guy in South Africa happened to have his clinic very close to where my sister lives. So I lived with my sister for a while, wasn't getting paid by anyone, and went and learned a lot with him, and he was amazing.
Wow, so you went back to South Africa?
I went back to South Africa, and I stayed there until the FDA approved it in this country, which was at the end of 95, right at the end of 95. And first cases were done in early 96. And so as soon as the laser got approved here, I came back And I was one of the few surgeons that had any real experience with a laser that was board certified or board eligible in this country. And started working with that company that was based out of Windsor, the TLC guys.
Yeah.
And worked with them. And so, for the first few months or so, I did cataract, a bit of everything. And then within several months, I quit doing that and just was a pure LASIK laser guy from 97 onwards, or 96 onwards.
What inspired you to narrow down just on LASIK?
I wanted to be able to just focus on the one thing and be as good as I could possibly be at that. I was also, relatively young, and I knew that other folks who were offering the laser were older, more established, and I wanted to be able to people to know this is all I do. And maybe part of it was I wanted to make sure I was really, really good at it. I wasn't sure I could be the best LASIK guy and the best cataract guy and the best glaucoma guy, and that's just not realistic, right? I figured if I had a shot at being, as good as anyone, I needed to just focus on one thing.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did.
Do you recall, and I'd imagine you guys practice surgery on non-human eyeballs and things like that to start, but do you remember one of your first surgeries and how you felt?
Yeah, I mean, whenever we do surgery, we practice on pig eyes and then human eyes and then a human, and it's always different when it's a live human. Number one, the stakes are obviously real. When you're working on a cadaver eye or a pig eye, obviously there's no real ramifications if things go bad. And then also technically it's just more difficult. When you're working on an eye, having access to that eye is real easy because there's no bones. You don't have to worry about the forehead or the eye being deep set or the lids being tight or the patient moving. And all of those things don't sound like a lot, but in reality, those are things that can really mess you up during surgery.
Yeah.
And so, I can remember some of the first cases, and it is nerve-wracking. I mean, and that's probably the reason why I just want to focus on that, to develop enough experience pretty quickly. And so really within several months, I'd done cases back in Africa, and then when I came over here, I really built up the volume pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's incredible. And so you were at TLC. Was that the company in Windsor?
Yeah.
Where were you practicing when you came back to the States?
I was in Greenville, South Carolina.
Okay.
But I never gave up my apartment in Atlanta. I always knew that I'd be coming back here. I thought I would go up there for a couple of years, really hone my skills, learn the business side of it, and then come back to Atlanta and open up in Atlanta, where there was some very established clinics. I mean, the Emory Clinic was, I think, one of the biggest private practice LASIK clinics in the country at the time. I think they had 30-odd refractive surgeons in the central Georgia area, all collated under one group. And I knew if I was going to be in that environment, I needed to be really, really good at it. I just needed to have a low complication rate. And so I thought I'd go up to Greenville, work with them just for a year or two, hone the skills, learn the business, come back to Atlanta. But it went really well, and then when I had the opportunity to come back, I had an opportunity to take over laser here because some other surgeons had bought laser and it wasn't going well for them. And so I had a chance to take that over. I actually brought the company with me and worked with TLC for several more years.
Here in Atlanta?
In Atlanta. So I was with them in Greenville, here, and also Charleston, South Carolina. And so we had those 3 locations, and it went really well for us. And it was kind of interesting because right around 2002 or so, 2003, I should remember this date better, but I don't. I got a call from my lawyer, and she's like, we were getting ready to sign a revised contract. And she's like, sit down, I need to tell you something. I thought she was kidding. She said, no, seriously, you need to sit down. And she said, they fired you. I'm like, what are you talking about? There's no way. And they did. And so they terminated the contract. I'm still never sure to this day exactly what happened there. And I was caught completely off guard. Like I think they thought I was going to go on my own. I'm not exactly sure what happened there. But I'd made no preparations at all. I mean, we'd opened up a couple clinics, but that was under the TLC banner with their permission. They were running it. They were doing the books. And And I wasn't ready for that at all. And so I ended up phoning some guys in the laser company and said, there was one guy in particular, Steve Parks. I phoned up Steve, and I'm like, Steve, this is what happened. He's like, no way. I'm like, yeah. He said, what do you need? I said, yes. I said, what do you mean yes? I said, I need to find a place. I need a laser. I need technicians. I need training. I need equipment. I need testing equipment. I need marketing. I need business cards. Yes, I just need it all. and so we kind of bumbled our way through that. And initially, I actually approached several of the major practices in town and said, listen, I've developed a really good referral network, because we were doing a lot of surgery, and it was all referrals. We were doing very little, at some point, zero marketing whatsoever. It was all referrals from past patients, and a lot referral from other eye doctors who weren't doing LASIK surgery, other eye surgeons, and a lot of optometrists who don't do surgery. And so I went to other eye surgery practices and said to them, hey, listen, I really would love to join your practice, and let me run the LASIK division of your practice. Just make sure that you don't steal it away from me. And if other surgeons want to do LASIK, that's cool, but that's what I want to do. And they all said, no way. Just, we'll take your business. And good luck to you. I never understood that, because I could have helped them in other ways as well. Because our referral base could have translated to other non-LASIK work. The doctors that were happy sending LASIK to me, they could have been sending other work like cataracts, glaucoma, diabetics. And so maybe I didn't do a good enough job selling it, or maybe the terms of what I was looking for, I always look back and then say, like, what did I do wrong with that? Because that would have been a lot easier than doing it on my own. But none of that panned out, so we just opened up on our own doing pure LASIK. And that's how we got started.
Wow. I had no idea about any of this. So a couple things. If TLC would have renewed that contract.
Oh, I was a lifer. When I decided to come back to Atlanta and brought them with me, I made the decision that I was going to be a lifer with them. And
I'm only laughing because I only know you as the man now for doing this. So little did they know what they did. I
still think it would have turned out better for everyone, for them and for me, if we had done this together. But that wasn't their game plan at the time. And after the 2008 financial crash, it was really tough. I mean, we'll get to that in a minute, but we built this up over time. The 2008 financial crash came in, and the LASIK volume dropped significantly. It dropped like 65% across the country.
Because it's not covered by insurance at all.
Not covered by
insurance.
It's
a self-pay.
And we were discounting more. So everyone's, financials went down, their revenue went down approximately 70, 75%, 70%. And so, most of the corporations, at one point there were 33, 34, something like that, public corporations that were offering LASIK. So there was 2020 and Beacon and SureSight and LVI and LASIK Plus and TLC and just a whole slew of them. And they all went bankrupt. Everyone went bankrupt at some point. And even now, a lot of those have rolled up into one corporation. It's not even public. Someone took it private. So it's a very interesting kind of and difficult business model. During that difficult time right after the 2008 crash, we were able to survive because we had a bunch of clinics, but we were sharing resources, and we were just a little bit more nimble in what we were able to do.
Yeah. So what year did the firing happen, and you try to connect with other companies, but it doesn't work out, and that's when Woolfson Eye started. So what year was that?
So we started on my own in around 2003.
Okay.
2002, 2003, there was like a transition period there. And I initially started by calling it Custom Laser Eye, because I thought I wanted to have a generic name. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're in the marketing world. I wanted to have a generic name. I also wanted to make it easier for other surgeons to come and use my facility and be part of my group, because I always thought we'd do better by working together. And I thought if I put my name on it, it would make it more difficult for other people to come and use it. Mm-hmm. Whereas if it's a generic place, then it's easier. We did that for a couple of years, and then all the market research we were doing was showing us that patients really prefer to have the main doctor's name on the door. And so we rebranded it as Woolfson Eye a couple of years later. And I think that's worked well for us.
You got an awesome last name, too. So that was cool. Where'd the purple come from? You've just always loved it?
I'm not even exactly sure where purple really came from. I know my mom loved purple, and I started wearing purple socks when I first started.
Yeah.
And my mom had sent me some, and I said, fine, this will be my good luck charm. And I'm not even that superstitious, but it just became my thing. And then every day I've done LASIK, I've always worn purple socks.
I've seen them. I love them.
And so that became our corporate color, and whether or not it helped or hurt, I don't care.
Oh, I think it's helped. Just from a marketing side, purple's not a commonly used color in companies in marketing. A lot of blues, yellows, golds, greens, but like off the top of my head, is FedEx, they've got purple in it.
Yeah, I think FedEx
they've got
purple,
that. Yeah, they've got that as well. That's fascinating. Okay, take a quick bathroom break, and when we come back, we're going to dive into the growth of Woolfson Eye Institute.
All right.
Okay, so Dr. Woolfson, so where we left off before the bathroom break, we were talking about...
We're talking about body armor.
Body armor. Guys, I just converted Dr. Woolfson. I introduced him to Body Armor. Body Armor, please sponsor us. We are drinking the dragon fruit berry, Dr. Woolfson. You'll get a percentage of it if the sponsorship comes from this episode. Okay, so we were talking about Woolfson Eye Institute, how you had the different name, you branded it as Woolfson Eye, you grew the business. 2008 happens, the crash, but you guys survive. So you're mainly LASIK at first. At what point did you start expanding into bringing on other doctors, and walk me through the growth?
So we had started before '08. I think if you remember, there was a little tech bubble burst during the Clinton presidency. I forgot what year it was. It may have been around '03. No, it was later than that. Anyway, there was the tech bubble kind of burst, and what we found was LASIK took like a pretty big dive after that. It wasn't nearly as big as the '08 crash, but it kind of woke me up to, wow, we're pretty vulnerable here. And so we had all this infrastructure in terms of brick and mortar places to see patients. And we had a sales team that would talk to patients and go visit referring doctors to make it easy for them to refer to us. And so we had the ability to do more than LASIK, and we were only utilizing those clinics because the LASIK surgery became very efficient very quickly. And so we're only actually doing surgery about a day a week or less. And so I thought, okay, we need to start bringing on other doctors to provide non-LASIK services. Also, around that time, technology was developing where the lenses that you use for cataract surgery. So just as a general overview, when you're doing cataract surgery, the natural lens inside the eye is getting cloudy, and you take out that cloudy lens and you replace it with a plastic or silicone, some flavor of artificial lens. Those lenses that you replace it with are getting a lot more sophisticated and a lot better. And I was realizing that that interface between cataract surgery was melding with refractive surgery. And some patients may actually be better off getting lens surgery rather than cataract surgery. And I want to keep that all under the same house. And so partly to offset costs and partly to make sure we were a full-service refractive surgery center, we started bringing on non-LASIK doctors, surgeons, that would provide cataract surgery and others. And so that worked out. We had started that before the '08 crash. That helped us. And then right after the '08 crash, we really put that on steroids and brought in a lot of other doctors to provide all the different services. And we try to keep doctors in a niche. So we want everyone to be really, really good at what they're doing. And my experience was that that's easier to be done if you're limiting your practice to a small part of eye surgery or even medical eye care. And so we've got doctors that do just retina surgery or just glaucoma or just plastic surgery around the eyes. And I think that helps us deliver a better quality of care for the patients.
Yeah.
So we started developing that on steroids, and that's what kept us healthy.
And how have you managed being a business owner and a doctor at the same time and balancing both of those worlds as the company's grown?
I'm not sure how well I've done with all of them, but I think on the medical side, I've got really good doctors around me, and we've standardized the decision making for who's a good candidate for laser and who's not. And so we do a lot of in-house training, and we have very set protocols for safety issues to make sure that everyone that I see is a good candidate for laser. So it's very, 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 very rare that I ever see a patient that I decide, oh, this patient shouldn't be here, that we shouldn't be doing surgery on this patient. Because I review all the charts before surgery. And so we've got doctors at each clinic that have got these protocols, and a lot of it's very technical. A lot of it's just numbers-based now. Even when we're looking at map readings, those maps are reduced to different numbers and algorithms. And then we have a risk score analysis that allows us to put every eye of every patient onto a risk analysis to see, okay, what's the risk level for that eye, for that patient? And if it reaches a certain benchmark, then we don't do LASIK. We may do other surgery, we may do nothing. So it's made our decision-making a lot more standardized. Some people think what we use is a little too conservative. I don't think it is. I think it's appropriate. That's why we do it, right?
Yeah.
We always think that what we're doing is right, and what someone else is doing is maybe not exactly perfect.
I don't think too conservative for the eyes is a bad thing.
No, it's not. I think it works really well. And so we're able to kind of limit the number of days I'm actually doing surgery right now is still less than half my time, and the other half it's on the business side. And I've got really good business folks around me that run operations or run the finances, and I think that works really well.
When you hire someone, how much are you trusting your gut? Like when you're bringing somebody on the team, because I've met a lot of people that are great for it. Like, how do you judge someone's character when you're bringing them on the team?
You know, it's really hard. And I don't just trust myself on this. I think we get a lot of folks involved on my admin team, and my wife as well. My wife's actually got a really good track record with hiring doctors. All the ones she's given thumbs up to have done really well with us. It doesn't mean they're good or bad. It just means they're a good fit for our culture, our organization.
Yeah.
But it is hard. I mean, I think most of the eye training is so difficult to get accepted into a good ophthalmology program. And then the training is very vigorous, and the board exams are very, very vigorous. So it's very, very, very rare that you're going to find someone that gets through all of that and is not competent at what they do. What we're looking for is folks with a really good work ethic and people that love to do surgery and have not lost sight of the fact of why they're there as doctors in the first place.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy when doctors are put under a lot of stress and it takes so long to do the training. When they come out of training, they're like, yeah, I need to start making some money, and they get focused too much on that. I think I really want folks that are still focused on helping patients.
Yeah.
And you can do both. You can be successful and make enough money and take care of people and do some freebies as well. If people didn't have the money and we're able to do it, then I think it's a privilege for us to be able to do surgery for people that can't afford it. Yeah. Now, we can't afford to do that all day, every day, obviously. But we can afford to do that, a fair amount. And so the people we're hiring, I want them to have a similar kind of attitude about that. Yeah. Not that we're trying to take time away from them. That's not our only focus, is not doing free work, but that needs to be a part of it.
Yeah. Present day, you guys have grown tremendously. I think I just saw Deline post 200 employees, 13 locations. I've seen it grow significantly over the years. Was that always in the plan of having this ambitious goal to grow larger, or did it kind of slowly happen over time?
I think I always had an overall plan of, something in the region made sense. And I wasn't looking specifically to grow into cold locations. And what happened was when we first got started, I mentioned earlier, I was one of the very few people that was like a pure LASIK surgeon. There are very few of us in the country who were pure LASIK surgeons early on. And So we were getting referrals from a 200-mile radius from other eye doctors just sending their LASIK to us, or sending patients that had done LASIK locally that had had a problem. We were trying to fix it for them. And after a while, I'd gone to the company that I was working with. Went to TLC and I said, listen, I can't see people coming from a 3-hour drive from Knoxville, 3.5-hour drive from Knoxville, and a 2-hour drive from the other side of Chattanooga coming to see us in Atlanta. I don't see that happening very long, or Birmingham, which is 2.5-hour drive away. We need to go and put like a place in those cities and do surgery in those cities. And I think that was part of the reason we ended up breaking up. We didn't have full alignment on that vision. But to me, I mean, you've got competent surgeons in each of these cities. They're going to learn how to do the surgery, and we should, if we're really getting a sizable number of patients from there, just from word of mouth and from doctor referrals, then that's where we should be. And so that was the footprint we started with. We didn't like go to a cold city and say, oh, I want to go to Louisville, Kentucky, and we know no one there, and we're just going to market or do whatever to try and grow there. It was like, no, people knew us. They were sending patients to us from this wide swath in the Southeast. And so we decided just to service those existing cities that were already supporting us anyway.
Because they already knew who you were, had a footprint, give the people what they want.
That's right. And so we weren't trying to, create this from scratch and do this from nothing. And so that's how we ended up in the cities that we're in. And we built that out. And, now we've got a lot of surgeons in Atlanta doing non-LASIK work, and some that are also doing some other LASIK outside of me.
Yeah.
And more recently, we've taken cataract surgery outside of Georgia, and now we have cataract surgeons in Chattanooga, and some that are going to start doing in Knoxville and Johnson City, Tennessee, and Asheville, North Carolina.
Yeah.
So it's worked well. And again, we weren't looking to go to new cities. We already had doctors referring LASIK to us there. We had an existing clinic that was dark, nothing happening there for 2 or 3 days a week. And we had a staff there, we had equipment there. And so if you find the right surgeon, then it's easy to kind of build that. The difficult part is finding the right surgeon. And so that was more difficult than I anticipated.
In what way?
Well, I mean, we've been looking for a long time, like a better part of 10 years to fulfill this. But finding the right surgeon who is really good at the surgery, really good with patients, really good with referring doctors, has a really good work ethic, wants to work with optometry in a collegial way, and wants to work for someone else, not just do their own thing. That's a lot of boxes to check.
Yeah.
And we need all of them checked. We don't need most of them checked. We need all of them checked. And it's got to start with providing a really, really, really good product. In other words, you better be a really good surgeon.
Yeah.
And you better love doing surgery, and you better just want to be in that OR all the time, because that's what we get up to do, is to do a lot of surgery and do it well.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of how to word this question, but something that I really admire for you and other businessmen and women that I've talked to is as their teams grow, payroll grows, expenses grows.
Yeah.
Personally, I've mentioned before, I've struggled with anxiety before. And so as my team has grown and my payroll has grown, it's anxiety driven. How did you manage the growth in terms of the people and the payroll? Because that's something that's not talked about as much, but it's a lot. I mean, you have people's livelihoods revolving around what you guys are doing. How did you kind of manage that?
I actually see that as one of our greatest successes, is the fact that we've got over 200 people now working for us, and we can provide them with what we think is a really good work environment, pay them pretty well, and if we do well, then we can give bonuses. I love writing bonus checks.
Yeah.
It means that there's money there to give bonus checks for. And so I think that's pretty cool. I mean, it's nice to have a place where people want to go to work. And in a lot of our key positions, we do not have a lot of turnover. I think more recently, we've had more of that. Just that the labor market has been very difficult lately. But in general, we've kept our key people, kept most of our people for long periods of time. I mean, I've got techs that have been with me from day one, several of them. I've got managers that have been with me from day one. I've got executives that have been with me now for nearly 20 years. My main optometrist has been with me from day one. And so you're trying to grow and still keep it in line with a small family-owned business kind of thing.
Yeah. As you guys have grown, I can't assume this. Have people approached you to purchase Woolfson Eye?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of private equity roll-ups where private equity companies are buying different eye practices and then kind of merging them and finding the synergies. And we've been approached by them. We've had discussions with them. I still love what I do.
Yeah.
I want to keep doing what I'm doing for a while, at least 10 more years, probably 15. All right. And, I am concerned about that. I think if you're going to do that, you've got to find the right group. We would still want to be able to retain some level of control. Mm-hmm. We would want to make sure it's the right group that we're going to be happy afterwards. And I've got a lot of my friends that have sold out, and some are happy with that, and a lot of them are not. And the ones that want to stick around for a long period of time tend to be in the more unhappy part. Yeah. So I'm sure there's a good match there if we were looking. Right now, we're just plowing ahead trying to make sure we do what we do well.
What are some of your motivations? Because you're one of the most driven people I know. What really motivates Jonathan Woolfson?
I think what I said earlier kind of is one of the biggest things for me is providing a place that is providing really great services and a great place to work. I mean, we had last week was probably a good example. And I'm not sure how this happened, but 1 week a year, I take the family out, and we put on that schedule a year in advance. And so on my schedule, which never changed, I was out for last week. And Christmas break, I'm out. Somewhere along the line, signals got crossed, and I was scheduled to do surgery in 5 different cities on those 5 days I was supposed to be out. And for whatever reason, we only figured that out right before, 2 weeks prior. And so now we're stuck. A lot of surgery. We had 100 surgeries that week or more. And so I don't want to disappoint the patients. I don't want to disappoint the referring doctors. I don't want to disappoint the kids. But something's got to give, right? And so real commitment to the family. And I've got a real commitment to the business. And I've got a real commitment to my patients. But I can't keep everyone happy. So we actually found a really good compromise. We gave patients an option to reschedule to the end of the week. I cut my vacation short, flew back early, and did surgery on Friday, Saturday, and worked on Sunday as well. And we figured, okay, we could do that, and I only lost 3 days or 4 days of vacation.
Christmas Eve, Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, we're working on Sunday and Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
But the real question, what are you going to do with staff, right? I'm certainly not going to make that mandatory to go and work on.
No.
We give people long weekends around the holidays as much as we can, just so they can travel and enjoy their families.
Yeah.
So we just kind of threw it out there and said, well, we're thinking of doing some work on those days. Anyone who's interested, and bam, all my main texts said, fine. I will drive to Knoxville. I will pick you up at the airport. I will drive you, to Chattanooga. Then drive you home afterwards, blah, 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 blah. And it ended up being a really good bonding experience. I wasn't strong-arming anyone to do it. I wasn't even offering a whole bunch of extra money, but yeah, people will get bonuses. But that wasn't the motivator for it.
Yeah.
But it was really a great team effort, and it just kind of, and we all commented after, and they said, this was really cool. All right, and so I think I'm motivated just to grow things and create a good environment.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, because I think, again, having people on the show, I want to break down the walls and misconceptions that people have. And from the outside looking in, successful doctor, husband, father of 4 kids, you can do what you want when you want. And you can, but you're also willing to put in the work for the commitment to your patients and to your family and everyone.
Yeah, and I know it sounds kind of hokey, but I mean, for me,
no, it doesn't.
For me, it's really true. Like I don't take that money and like I don't belong to a country club. I love to play golf, but I play maybe twice a year, or I sound really bad. But I love it anyway. Whenever I do play,
we could
with
be
my
bad
buddies.
together.
You know, and I said earlier, I don't do the plane, boat, second home kind of thing. I don't need that in my life. At least not at this stage. I'm sure that may change over time. And so I'm not doing this to buy all the bling and the expensive stuff. I think for me, having the financial security was part of that at the beginning. But I think I kind of blew past that. That's a pretty low bar after a while. That ended up being a low bar. And so that's not what drives me right now. I mean, I love what I do. I love making people happy. I truly love making patients happy. Yeah. And it's really cool doing something with your hands. I mean, it's really cool when you take someone who can't see, you do something with your hands, press a pedal, and then they can see. And then, like my wife says, I'm not a real doctor. She says, oh, you just push a button on the laser, okay? So, and in a sense, that's a little tough on me. But in a sense, that's also true. I mean, it's like, what I do is not that complicated once you figure it out. And the patients sit up and they can see, and they're crying. Half my patients get up over there and they're emotional. And it's really, I mean, that to me it's a privilege. Again, that sounds hokey, but it's true. We still get the goosebumps. I mean, like, and my texts are the same way. I mean, after having done this so many times, if you can relate to the patients, because when I'm operating, I'm normally talking to my patients saying, hey, what do you do? And part of it, I'm just interested because you learn, right? But part of it also gets patients' minds off the fact that they've got some crazy African surgeon putting a laser on the eyeball. Okay. And before they know it, at least half the patients say, oh, you're done already? Okay. And so you learn about people, but then they get off the table and they can see it. It's really cool. I mean, it's really, really neat to see that. And then the vast majority of patients do really well with the surgery.
I'm a firsthand example. I mean, I worked with you for years on the marketing side, and then I got to experience it myself. And it's one of those things you don't understand until you experience. I sat up from the table. I looked across the room. I could see the clock for the first time. I start crying. I give you a hug. We take our picture. I go home for 2 days. It's been 6 years.
Yeah, and that's why, I mean, I really, truly love my job. And it's not like it's all a bed of roses. I mean, it would be disingenuous to say that every day is a perfect day on the planet, right? And that just doesn't exist. And we've had plenty of tough times. There are some stressful times. We've had some interesting interactions with referring doctors that have been disappointing. We've had interactions with patients that are very disappointing as well. But that's just people. That's just life. I mean, we were talking earlier, offline, about the fact I've had some race issues come up.
I was going to bring that up. Share those stories.
Yeah, with patients and referring doctors. And probably the most impactful for me was I had one eye doctor used to send me a lot of LASIK patients, and then one day just quit. And I noticed it, and I kind of phoned him up and didn't take my phone call. I texted him, he didn't return the text. I even went to his office to go visit him and say, like, what have I done? Did I screw up one of the patients? And we look back and because we keep, we track all the patients' outcomes very closely. We couldn't find any patients that had a problem. We had no record of any patients complaining. And I was like, what have we done? And I went to go see him, wouldn't even see me. And so at some point we gave up. 2 years later, I get a phone call from him. He says, Jonathan, I want to take you out for lunch. I'm not going to use his name. I'll say it's Jordan. He says, Jordan phones me up and he says, hey, I want to take you for lunch. I'm like, what's this about? And he says, chill you over lunch. I'm like, this is going to be interesting. Okay. And we sit down and he's got this wrapped present, looks like a book, pushes it over. He says, this is for you. I want you to open this up. So I open up, and it's a Jewish prayer book. It's a Haggadah, right? And I'm like, okay, what's going on here? And he says, I need to make a confession. He says, I used to send you all this work, And then 2 years ago, I found out you were Jewish. And so I quit referring to you. I said, did I screw something up? He said, no, I just didn't want to deal with a Jew boy. I'm like, shit. It's not often that I'm at a loss for words. Yeah, I was at a loss for words. I had no idea what to say. And he said, but, I've gone back and I've spoken to Jesus and I've spoken to my pastor and I was wrong. And I'm here to ask for forgiveness and to move forward. And I was like stammering for words. And I was like, okay, yeah, you got my forgiveness. So I was thinking, wow, what a crazy thing for this to be happening in this day and age that we're living in. And he was from North Georgia, but not from the middle of nowhere. And it's just, this could happen anywhere, right? And I said, well, it's kind of weird that happened. I don't even really want to deal with that part of it. But I saw the positive side of it was, first of all, Mr. takes a lot of guts to re-examine that in himself and then to fess up to it. He could have very quietly have just started working with me again and said nothing. And, if I'd asked what happened, he could have said nothing or said whatever he wanted to say. But he fessed up and wanted to face the music. And so I gave him a lot of credit for that. I gave him a lot of negative credit for what happened at the beginning. But net, I wasn't even sure where I ended up with it all and just wanted to move on.
Yeah.
But it was like kind of a crazy wake-up call that this world we live in has taken such great strides in getting past minority, problems and discrimination and bigotry, but it hasn't gone as far as we'd like. Yeah. But I've seen that in other ways. At one point I hired an African-American surgeon, and I was told by 2 different referring doctors, you hire the surgeon, we're going to stop working with your whole clinic. And so at that point, now I've got to hire that surgeon, okay? Yeah. Because you can't let the bigots win, okay? And so I still believe in this country, but there is a ways to go. But I think I have seen tremendous changes. I'm more of an optimist in all of that. I think we've come a long, long way from where we were even 20, 30 years ago. Yeah. But those were like some interesting interactions that we've had that will stay with me the rest of my life. I mean, I can still, even now just talking about it, I can kind of feel like the way I felt at that table. And it's a mix of emotions, right? One was super negative, that you got someone being blatantly anti-Semitic, and on the other hand, someone being so brave to fess up to it and move on. So there's this crazy extreme of emotions there.
Wow.
And you got to give the guy a tremendous amount of credit for that.
Took balls.
Yeah.
Took balls to do that.
Absolutely.
I mean, because you are admitting, like, one of the worst things you can admit, like, I hate you for who you are.
Yeah.
Do y'all talk today?
Yeah.
Damn.
And he's a good guy. He's a good guy.
Well,
I mean, I just think we are so much a product of our backgrounds, and sometimes we forget how much it influences who we are and how we think and what we do. And I'm not even sure what the right solutions are. You're talking about communication, and people bandy that around a lot, but it does kind of boil down to that. But I'm overall, as I said, an optimist that I think we have made a lot more progress than sometimes you want to admit to, because there's still problems. People are still going to be problematic, but I think you see that around the world. I mean, if you are a foreigner living in Japan or a foreigner living in Africa, it's a problem, even within the same race. I mean, in South Africa's had terrible problems with other blacks coming from Zimbabwe into South Africa. There's been really bad xenophobia and violence and people getting killed because they weren't from South Africa, or they weren't from a certain tribe. And so I think you see that around the world, and that's why I was saying earlier, we've got this greater American experiment of lumping large groups of people together in the same country. And I wish we had leaders that would bring people together more than they are dividing them. And I see it on both sides. I'm disappointed on the left and the right.
Yeah.
That I think people on the left are dividing people and people on the right are dividing people also. And I think somehow maybe that appeals to the core base better. I'm not sure what that is. But I think we need real leaders bringing people together more than splitting them apart.
I think so too. And sharing stories like you just shared are important for people to hear, because a lot of times it's behind the scenes and it doesn't get talked about and people don't see. But I appreciate you sharing that, because people do need to hear that. And it really is up to us to keep pushing the narrative forward. And I agree with you. I mean, growing up in my karate school, we had a very diverse community. Ironically, very strong Indian community and Jewish community in our Japanese martial art.
Where were you?
Down the road in Norcross.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
But in my black belt group, there was 9 different cultures represented in just my black belt test. It was fascinating. But there is hate from everywhere. Like, and a lot of people that are born in America think it's just black and white. That's racism. It exists everywhere, every country, every culture, same skin, same culture, and they fight against one another.
No, I agree. People, it's natural for people to think about us and them. I'm not sure what's natural, but it happens a lot. And I think leaders, it's an easy thing for leaders to divide people, to get more popular or more powerful themselves by creating an us versus them environment. And I think people play on that. Bad leaders will play on that.
It's also, I mean, an us versus them, it brings up a bigger conversation of like competition and competing against one another. Because if you think about, just on a simple example, sports teams. I mean, I love football and basketball. I'm not proud to say it, gotten in fights with other fans at games where it's like you hate the other person because they are just from another team. And you put that at a much deeper level, and that's where it comes from. But like I said before, it's up to us to.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think we're going to fix that right here, but it's really disappointing to me.
It is, but I'm with you on being the optimistic side. Like, it definitely has improved over the years. I heard this comedian talking one day, and he's like, guys, if you look over the last 1,000 years, we've improved as a society.
Yeah.
We talk now. We communicate. Like, nothing's perfect, but the fact that that gentleman could even come to you and admit that shows progress, and hopefully can inspire other people to kind of look at that.
Yeah, I think it's also easy for people to always say there's not enough progress because we want a perfect world. But maybe it goes back to what I was saying earlier. You've got a bunch of like pretty bad options out there. Let's get the best of the bad options and make it better.
Yeah.
And I've never been involved too much on the political side, but I wish there were leaders that were bringing folks together more. Me
too. I think some people probably start with that good intention, and they get wrapped up into the darkness of what the political world is.
Yeah, and I see the cancel culture on both sides. I mean, if you're on the far right, if you don't believe in everything on that end, you're canceled. And certainly on the far left, if you don't believe in every certain part of that, then you get canceled. I mean, to me, one of the best examples was Martina Navratilova, right? You know who she is?
Mm-mm.
So she was arguably one of the best female tennis players ever. I mean, Serena Williams probably, is in that discussion as well. But Martina Navratilova was in the 80s when I was growing up, and she's left-handed, and was a super aggressive player, very, very good, and she was gay, or is gay, and she was gay at a time where it wasn't nearly as accepted as it is now.
Yeah.
Right. In many senses now, a lot of the kids these days want to be part of some sort of minority group, I think.
They do.
Because they want to be part of some identity. And if you're, anyway, we won't go into that. But she was, gay at a time where it wasn't really hip and cool. And she probably lost out on a lot of marketing opportunities because Chris Evert was her rival. Right. And Chris Evert didn't win nearly as much as she did, but probably got more of the endorsements. She was heterosexual. She was married. She was white. She filled a lot of those boxes. But Martina Navratilova ended up being just a great ambassador for the LGBTQ plus community.
Yeah.
And was on some world governing body for that. And more recently, she came out with some statements saying, I don't remember all the details, but she wasn't supporting trans women competing against other women. And this is someone whose whole life has been in the gay community and promoting the gay power and agenda and helping people. And she disagrees on that one issue, which to me is a pretty fuzzy issue. I'm not sure what's right or wrong there, because biologic males have more strength and more testosterone, are going to run faster and be better in a lot of the athletics. So I'm not sure what the right answer is there. It's certainly debatable in my mind. She got pretty much canceled. She was kicked off that world governing body. I just don't understand it. There's got to be room in this world to say, yeah, we can disagree with you on that, but man, you've done so much other great work.
Yeah, it's almost like people hone in on one action. If we had something going over our head, a little screen that stated the worst thing you've ever done, and that's all we judge.
Terrible. Yeah.
Which what she did isn't even the worst thing she ever done. It's just her opinion.
And I'm not even sure she did anything wrong. But it's these purity tests on both sides.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not many people that have on the Trump corner that have disagreed with anything he said of significance.
Yeah.
And survived in his orbit. And it's the same thing on the far left. You can't be part of that movement and have a disagreement on something like this. We need to do better at that.
Well, that and also give people an opportunity to learn and grow.
Yeah.
I mean,
and make mistakes.
I told this to my wife. When I grew up, the homophobic slurs, like we used them all the time. Like calling things gay and making fun of it, like we used that a lot. And it wasn't until, I'll never forget, 19 years old, I have a lesbian friend and she pulled me aside and she's like, hey, it really bothers me when you say that stuff. And then the light bulb went off for me. And it still took me a few years after to not use anything of that. But if someone found a tweet I made or something I made on Facebook, I promise you right now, I'm putting it out there, I will get canceled.
Done.
It's going to happen. So I'm going to get in front of it because it's like, I'm telling you, I did that.
Yeah.
It's not a question.
No, and that's right. And what you were saying earlier is true. It's like if you look at the expanse of humankind over thousands of years or hundreds of years, we're evolving.
It's better.
And not everyone's evolving at the exact same rate. And those differences are measured in years or maybe tens of years over a span of, human civilization over a heck of a lot longer period than that.
Yeah.
So I think things are evolving. If you look at it with that lens, it's actually evolving really quickly.
And positively.
And positively. It's not perfect, and we want it to be better, and we want it to be perfect today, and it's not perfect today. But if you just look at the evolution in general, to me, yeah, we're heading in the right direction. I get horribly disappointed, but with some actions, but we've got to keep the extremists out. That's the bottom line.
We do. Well, you made a comment earlier, you can't let the bigots win.
You can't let the bigots win.
You can't let the bigots win. Jonathan, I can't thank you enough. We got to get you out of here. I've taken up enough time of your day already. Last thing I want to ask, when we were off camera taking the break, you talked about how this is going to be great for your children to go back and listen to. What would you like to say to them? What would a message, a piece of wisdom, anything you can share with them that they can replay? What would you say
I was not prepared for that.
I know.
No, I have given that thought to the kids because I try to teach them just a few things. And the biggest thing is, and they've heard this a lot from me, is just to be kind. And it sounds superficial and trivial, but in our day-to-day existence, it's so easy to be super judgmental, even of people that have done something wrong. And just to realize that, to be kind and give people some level of grace in life is super important. And then the second thing is just whatever you're going to do, be the best at it that you can. I know that's part of your philosophy as well.
It is. Well, I think that's great advice. I think you have been very kind to everyone and you're the best at what you do. I want to say this. Thank you, Juan, for coming on the show and giving me your time today. For everyone out there, he has 2 weeks out of the year. One we just heard about that his week got messed up. And he's been with me for 3 hours today on the one of only the 2 weeks he's off for the year. So thank you for that. You have always supported me. I met when we met when I was 19. You've had my back. You've supported me through all the ups and downs that I've gone through with my health journey. And then third, you've really been a great example for me as a leader, a mentor, a business owner, and just what it really means to be a man. So selfishly, this interview was just for me today to learn more about you. So I really love you, and I really appreciate just the relationship that we have, and thank you.
Well, I'm glad you've been able to grow your business so well. You've done really, really awesome. And for anyone who sees this and ends up getting surgery with us, you'll get a video before surgery. It's a long video. It's 27 minutes, but it covers everything you need to know. And I think that's one of the most positive things that we've done. People comment on that more than anything else, even though it's a little edgy at times. It's not scripted. It is just, a lot of it is just me talking like I normally talk. But Jordan, you were the one that really pieced that together, and it really kind of helps people see who I am and also deliver a lot of information. So that's one of the best things I've done. So thank you for that.
It's my pleasure. We had a lot of fun working on that project together. And shout out to Debbie as well for helping us with that video. We put a lot into that. Well, Dr. Woolfson, thank you again for coming on and share this story. People are going to love it. And to everyone out there watching or listening, thank you guys so much. We have just crossed 2.5 million views and listeners over the last year and a half. The show's popping off. We've got a lot more episodes coming soon. I can't thank you guys enough. I'm dedicated to telling more stories and spreading positivity and these messages out to the world. I love you guys. I appreciate you. We'll see you in the next episode of Find Your Edge. Take care.